If you're not a trumpet player and for some reason you clicked on the title anyway, you may as well hear this because it could make you feel better about your life choices. Today we're talking about every trumpet player's second most favorite topic and primary source of neurosis, the mouthpiece. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chase Sanborn and I'm a jazz trumpet player based in Toronto. If there are any sax players watching, I know that you all obsess about your mouthpieces too, and you often spend more than we do. There's a difference though. Your mouthpiece is designed to hold the reed, and no matter how much you complain about the quality or the price of reeds today, you still have the option of buying new ones. If I had the option to buy new pairs of lips, I'd be broke, but you'd hear no complaints from me. For brass players, our lips function as the reed, and the mouthpiece is a piece of metal that we press against them even as we try to coax musical vibrations from them. As the point of connection between the instrument and the vibrating medium, the mouthpiece is the most user-specific part of the horn. The choice depends on the instrument, the musical style, and the physical anatomy of the player. High brass players use smaller mouthpieces than low brass players. The relatively small amount of lip that vibrates means that even tiny differences in the trumpet mouthpiece can have a substantial effect on our sound, range, and technique, not to mention our psyche. This explains why tuba players may be found drinking their beer while the trumpet players are crying in theirs. I've played a lot of mouthpieces over the years. I don't remember what mouthpiece I started on back in the 5th grade, but it was probably a 7C that came in the case with my Holton collegiate trumpet. Some students assume that a 7C is a beginner mouthpiece because it is what often comes with a student instrument. In reality, a 7C is in the middle of the size range, which is a logical place for a beginner to start, but many professionals play a 7C or something similar. One thing that's important to understand is that there can be quite a bit of difference between two mouthpieces that are both stamped 7C. Mouthpieces are usually labeled with a number and a letter, or letters. The number refers to the diameter of the rim, and the letter to the depth or volume of the cup. 7C is associated with Vincent Bach, who made his first trumpet mouthpiece more than a century ago, and the company that bears his name has been making them ever since. In the Bach labeling system, the lower the number, the wider the rim, and the closer to the letter A, the bigger the cup. So for example, a 1A or a 1C would be a large mouthpiece, and a 10E would be a small mouthpiece. The difference is not that obvious to the naked eye, but your lips can definitely feel it. Other manufacturers have adopted the Bach labeling system, so you can find a 7C from a lot of different companies, some of them reputable and some of them less so. Even within the Bach brand, you can find differences in mouthpieces that have been made at different points in time. When Reynolds Schokey started making mouthpieces a few years after Bach, he went in the opposite direction. The bigger the number, the wider the rim. Yamaha, who is now one of the biggest trumpet manufacturers on the planet, adopted the Schokey system for their mouthpieces. In more recent years, custom or smaller makers have adopted a system wherein the number reflects an actual measurement. So for example, my GR66 mouthpiece rim diameter is roughly comparable to a Bach 3 or a Schokey or Yamaha 14. I think you can start to see the difficulty in comparing mouthpieces, particularly when they come from different manufacturers. That difficulty is compounded by the fact that the contour of the rim, the shape of it, will affect the perception of width, and the rim and the cup together have a combined effect on the way the mouthpiece responds and feels on the lips. For most people, the first and most important consideration will be the rim, since that's the point of contact. Most companies offer more than one rim, but there's often a family resemblance, and it's easier to compare mouthpieces from the same manufacturer, so you might save yourself some headaches by narrowing down the search. If you play more than one trumpet mouthpiece, and I'll talk more about that in the next video, or if you use mouthpieces on other horns like flugelhorn or cornet, it's usually best if you can stick with the same rim on all of them. That said, there are people who prefer a smaller rim on smaller horns like the piccolo. Another crucial factor is the cup volume, which has an impact on tone and range. As a broad generalization, orchestral players lean towards larger mouthpieces, which may produce a darker and more resonant tone. Lead players often play smaller mouthpieces, which tend to sound brighter and may respond better in the upper register. Because the range of acceptable tone quality is greater for jazz players, it's probably fair to say that the range of mouthpieces in use is as well. There are other elements of mouthpiece design, including the diameter and length of the throat, the backbore taper, and the gap between the end of the mouthpiece and the start of the lead pipe, and they all interact to affect how a mouthpiece plays. Plus, you got to keep in mind that the function of the mouthpiece pales in comparison to the function of the body. As I like to say, the instrument is not what you're holding, it's what's holding it. None of this is to ignore the impact that the mouthpiece has on our playing, and we all harbor the question of whether there's something out there that might make our job a little bit easier. Switching mouthpieces can be a study in compromise, though, because a change in one direction may come at the expense of another. The mouthpiece that gives you a rich, dark sound in the mid-register may be tough to play in the upper register, and your high-note mouthpiece may sound shrill in the mid-register. So my general rule is this. If a mouthpiece improves your tone without adversely impacting your range, that's worthy of consideration. If a mouthpiece improves your range without adversely impacting your tone, that's worthy of consideration. If a mouthpiece improves your tone and your range, buy it. If you do decide to change mouthpieces, be prepared for the fact that it may take some time before you're fully comfortable with a switch, or even before you know for sure that the switch is going to work. The way it feels in the store is not necessarily the way it'll feel a month from now or at the end of a gig. Players sometimes hit a point where the new mouthpiece isn't feeling as good as it did initially, and they reach back to their old mouthpiece only to realize that it doesn't feel right anymore either because your body has started to adjust to a new piece of equipment. Even worse is to move on to yet another new mouthpiece at that point. Some people fall prey to mouthpiece safaris, ever on the search for the mouthpiece that will solve all their problems, not realizing that continually switching creates more problems than it solves. I'm not trying to discourage you from trying out other mouthpieces and horns. As a matter of fact, the more you do that, the better you understand what the gear can and cannot do for you. But switching mouthpieces is a commitment, and I want you to be clear-eyed about that. Now, I could have skipped all this and said at the outset that the mouthpiece you should buy is the Chase Sanborn 66 MS. I'm kidding, of course. But let me know in the comments what mouthpiece you currently play and whether you have any thoughts or questions about any of this. In the next video, I'll talk about my 25-year collaboration with GR mouthpieces, and I'll demonstrate the models in the CS Signature line.